Check. Alright, so I'd like to tell you a little story about Pokemon, specifically Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, 4th generation. Now, if you're familiar with the 3rd generation of Pokemon, Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, you'll be aware that they introduced a mechanic known as the Pokemon contests. The Pokemon contests introduced this sort of alternative battle mechanic that sort of let you pretend as though you were participating in sort of a beauty contest with your Pokemon. It was a really interesting thing that they did for the game and added a really dynamic other way to think about the moveset that your Pokemon had and how effective it would be in this sort of other way of battling. Now, I mention this for Pokemon Diamond and Pearl because, as you know, Diamond and Pearl took that same mechanic, improved on it, introduced some new aspects to it. You could dress up your Pokemon, you could put little hats on them. There was a rhythm game that preceded the battling mechanic, as it were, the demonstration portion of the contest. So recently these games came out, and I was excited, the whole world was excited, real ones know the 4th gen was the best gen, and I was playing my way through it, and I got to the contest hall, and what met me there was heresy, sacrilege. I was brutally torn down by the fact that they replaced my favorite mechanic of these games, the Pokemon contests, with a rhythm minigame, not even a very good one. They completely removed the appeal portion of the contests. So instead I'm playing the originals, the original Pokemon Diamond, the original Pokemon Pearl, and I have set myself some arbitrary rules because I will be participating in a grueling beauty pageant rigmarole. I've decided to assemble the most fuckable team of baddie Pokemon babes out there. Now, because it's a beauty contest, girls only, no boys allowed. No, it's not. This isn't going well.
It's fine. Keep going.
No, it's stupid.
Yeah, that's the point.
Oh, sorry. I just got back from the gym. So to participate in this grueling 5-part Pokemon beauty contest rigmarole, I decided to assemble myself the baddest group of bitches in the entire Pokemon world. Now, for Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, unfortunately the pool is pretty limited. There's only 150 to choose from. So, for myself, I selected that I must have Milotic. Fuck, man. I do need a prompter. This sucks. I can't fucking think. Hang on. Let me check my I knocked over my Torchic. I decided for myself that my team would be Milotic, Misdreavus, Roserade, Lopunny, Weavile, and Lucario. This is where my descent into hell begins. So in my quest to assemble the most fuckable team of Pokemon, Lucario obviously evolves from Riolu. The only available Riolu in the game is given to you from a woman on a place called the Iron Island that happens after Canaclave City. Think I said that right? Yeah, call it whatever the fuck you want. This is where things get a little bit complicated. After guiding her through a cave, she gives you an egg. One egg. This was my first mistake. I would think, that Pokemon Pearl would generate the ID, the stats, the gender of the Pokemon as it hatches from the egg. My plan was to take the egg, run the allotted amount of steps, save right before it hatches, and reload that save to generate the Riolu that I required, a female one, which is already difficult as the gender ratio for Riolus is 86 male to 14 female. Slim odds. Now, real ones are watching this and saying to yourself, rookie mistake. I know. I was young. I was naive. This was a long time ago.
This was 2 weeks ago.
This was 2 weeks ago. So, obviously, that's not how eggs in Pokemon work. The Pokemon in the egg is generated the moment that you receive the egg, which means for this to work, I would have had to save at the exact moment before I received the egg from, I don't remember the fucker's name, they have a funny looking hat, and I would have to reload after every single time I get the egg, walk the 6,000 some steps to hatch the fucker, and then try again for a 14% rate of getting a female. Obviously, I didn't do this, and I was very disappointed when I found out that my Riolu would be remaining a male. Here's my second mistake. Now I thought, okay, this'll be fine. As everyone knows, Riolus are unable to breed and produce another egg. My intent was to just get more Riolus. You can breed them, right? Wrong. They're baby Pokemon. They can't fuck. So I did have to evolve it into a Lucario first. To evolve Riolu into Lucario, you must first raise its friendship stat to absolute maximum, which means, yeah, you gotta get the Soothe Bell first, feed it a couple of berries that increase its friendship, and level it up a few dozen times, get it to around level 24. It takes many encounters for its friendship to increase. But eventually, after an hour or so of grinding, I did have my male Lucario. Like I said, this was another mistake. I tossed it into the daycare with the daycare man with my female Lopunny. Knowing that they were both in the field egg group, I figured, yeah, they'll have a chance of making a baby Riolu. Wrong! That's not how any of this works. The real ones out there are shaking their head at me again. They're going, nope, not how any of this works. Actually, as I found out later after a quick bit of Googling, the resultant Pokemon from an egg of any pairing of like egg group Pokemon will only be the evolutionary line of the mother, which means that all of these eggs that I was getting and hatching, hoping eventually that I would get a female Riolu, were all just Veneries. Useless, shitty Veneries. So this is where I really had to switch up my tactics. I said, okay, I can't reload the game to get my female Riolu. I can't breed a female Riolu. Now I know what you're saying to yourself. You could just get a Ditto and breed the male Lucario with the Ditto and then maybe get a female Riolu. Due to my arbitrary rules, that was not a possibility. I'm not going to beat the Elite Four to unlock the National Dex to make it so that Dittos would appear in the wild. I have to have my team of fuckable Pokemon beat Cynthia, okay? She's a hottie baddie. I need to be even hotter and baddier. My team, my trainer, more fuckable than her. It's a fact. So Ditto's out of the question. Can't use it. Here's where things get off the rails.
I keep remembering parts that happened beforehand.
I remember a younger version of myself, a simpler version of myself, excited at a product that had recently dropped when I was playing this game as a young lad. It was called a Game Shark. It was a cartridge that allowed you to input cheats into the game. Many of you will remember this. I believed to myself, hey, I've probably got that laying around somewhere. I could probably plug it right back into my DS, have those cheats. I remember I could spawn any Pokemon I wanted to. I'll have that female Riolu in no time. Unfortunately, due to my severe lack of foresight, I did not keep my Game Shark. Lost to the annals of time, I have no idea where it is. However, there are emulators on the internet that can use those same Game Shark cheats. I said to myself, now here's a glimmer of hope. I'll go on the internet, I'll download one of these emulators, input a quick cheat code, and bada boom bada bing, I'll have my female Riolu. Easy as snapping. It wasn't. So I go with the first emulator that I hear about after a quick bit of Googling. It's called Melon DS. I'm sure you've heard about it. So I boot up the game. I'm playing for a little while. I try to input cheat codes only to find out that actually, in fact, Melon DS does not support these Game Shark cheat codes, despite several sources that claim the opposite. I simply can't get them to function. Actually, it does support the Game Shark cheat codes. I found this out much later. I was just using the wrong European version of the Pokemon Diamond ROM, don't judge me. But at the time, I was unaware. Okay, first emulator, didn't work. That's okay. Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna download a different emulator. I go online, I find another one. It's called Drastic. Guess what? This one, it does have cheats. For my simple monkey brain, I get it to work right off the bat. I go through some tall grass, I input a couple of cheats, and bada boom, bada bing, there she is, my female Riolu. I catch a couple of different ones just to make sure that I got the right nature that I want, quiet nature. And then, hallelujah, she's in my inventory. Now, due again to my significant lack of foresight, I didn't have a plan for trading it over to my actual DS. After coming up short and after a quick bit of Googling, I realized that Drastic in fact, does not have any kind of Wi-Fi connectivity. It doesn't have any kind of Wi-Fi connectivity enabled. Drastic, the emulator, actually has no Wi-Fi capability. The Drastic emulator does not have any way to connect to Wi-Fi. It simply doesn't possess the functionality. Now, obviously, I require the ability to connect to Wi-Fi if I am ever going to trade my female Riolu over to my DS. This is a problem. After another quick bit of Googling, I keep saying quick, the Googling wasn't quick. It was really hard to find all of these answers. The forums where these answers came from were deep. So after a bit of research, I discovered that actually, Melon DS, the very first emulator that I downloaded, does in fact have Wi-Fi connectivity capability. So I have to find some way to transfer this save file, where I have the female Riolu, over from Drastic to Melon DS. Now, this proves to not be oh so difficult. All I have to do is take the file, move it into a different folder, rename the extension at the end of it, and then manually load it in Melon DS. This all works just fine. I have my save with my female Riolu loaded in Melon DS. Now here comes the tricky bit. I have to connect it to the internet. A Nintendo DS is a very old system. The manner of Wi-Fi it was built to connect to is outdated, and trying to connect it to modern modems typically results in a network error. Now obviously, for a true-to-life Nintendo DS, this isn't very much of a problem, as you can connect it to a Wi-Fi source that has no security measures installed. As long as you have a completely open, unrestricted Wi-Fi source, such as a hotspot on your phone, you can still connect a Nintendo DS to the internet. Now, the problem with this is, the emulator is not a Nintendo DS. You have to fool the emulator into thinking it's a Nintendo DS. What does this require? As I found out after more hours of research, it requires 3 files. 2 BIOS files, 1 firmware file. What are these? Well, they're files that have to be directly ripped from a real-life Nintendo DS system. They are basically the files that tell the emulator, hey, this is a real DS. It should be able to do all the things a real DS can do, like connect to the internet. So I think this is an easy solution. I say, hey, I'll go on the internet, I'll Google it, I'll find these files, I'll download them, I'll install them into the Melon DS emulator, and everything will be hunky-dory. I'll connect to the internet, I'll trade my female Riolu to my DS, and I'll be fucking jacking off in no time. Such is not the case. For sure, installing those 2 files and the firmware is pretty easy. There's a lot of open source files on the internet that you can just download. It's pretty easy to install into the emulator, and then it runs as if it is though a real life blood Nintendo DS. Here's another problem though. The system I was going to use to trade this Pokemon over to my Nintendo DS is not the original Nintendo Pokemon World Trade System. That system is no longer functional. The Nintendo Global Trade System is currently being held up by a very dedicated team of people who are privately running their own servers, making it possible for people all over the world to continue trading Pokemon in this very old game. The other problem with this is that this team is very dedicated, and they moderate who is allowed to trade on this privately run server, which means that they recognize the firmwares that log in to use their global trading system, which also means that a lot of the ones that are publicly available on the internet have been downloaded before and used with emulators by people who are not so responsible. People with goals and ideals not so squeaky clean as mine. So, as I quickly discovered after typing in the private DNS that you need to alter your Wi-Fi settings to connect to this server so I can use the global trade system, I quickly found out that these firmwares are banned. Lots of them. Many of them. So after trying several out, scrolling through many web pages, many forums, different download links, I think I've installed some spyware onto my computer, I eventually find a set of BIOS files and firmware that I can install and aren't already banned from this private network. That trading network is Pokemon Classic, by the way. You guys are doing a great job. So, I'm finally able to connect to the Wi-Fi from my DS emulator. I'm finally able to connect to the Wi-Fi from my regular DS. I have to connect it to my phone, but it works. After rigging this whole thing up with shoestring and gum and a prayer, I'm finally able to connect both systems to the internet. Now, however, I quickly discover that the playthrough that I'm doing on the emulator hasn't progressed far enough to even use the global trade system. As an arbitrary rule, you're not allowed to access that building until you've beaten the first gym leader. Just as an extra little cherry on top, just to make things a little bit harder. As if all my hours of research weren't enough. I have to actually play the fucking game. So I go, I beat the first gym leader, I wander back, I get into the global trade system, I boot it up, I think everything's hunky-dory. I'm looking at the trade screen. It looks like I'm gonna finally be able to get my female Riolu, but there's one last obstacle. Guess what? You can't search for a trade for a Pokemon that you haven't seen in the game. So as one extra little bullshit arbitrary task, I have to run around, see some fucking Bidoofs, see some fucking Starlies, just so I have them in my Pokédex, so I can put them out as a seeking thing on the trade server so that I can finally have something to trade over for my female Riolu. And then, finally, salvation. It happens. I trade her over. She's on my DS. She's part of my team. This all took several days. Don't even get me started on the Feebas. We'll talk about that later. Thanks for tuning in, everyone, to the channel. Remember to like and subscribe. Depop link down in the description. On the flip side, yeah.